My name is Arabella. 2 weeks ago, I walked into my brother's promotion party with a gift and a fake smile and walked out with blood in my mouth. My father had punched me in the face and dragged me out by my hair in front of 68 people. But that wasn't what broke me. The worst part wasn't his fist or the scandalized hush of the crowd. It was my mother's laugh, a sharp, delighted sound cutting through the silence. It was my brother, the decorated hero, clapping as he said, "You had it coming." Not one person stopped them. What they didn't know was that as they left me bleeding in a cold, empty hallway, they had handed me the very key to their destruction. They didn't know that the ugly, broken thing they'd just thrown away was about to make one phone call that would unravel every lie they had ever built. How does a daughter they spent a lifetime trying to erase become the one who wipes their entire legacy off the map? It didn't start with a fist. It started with the quiet hum of polite conversation, the clinking of champagne glasses, and the weight of a gift in my hands that felt heavier than lead. I don't even know why I came. That thought kept looping in my mind as I stood near the ballroom sidewall, clutching my purse so tightly my knuckles were white. It was a shield, a pathetic one, against the room itself. The whole place was an exercise in my parents' taste, all gleaming marble floors that reflected the light from a dozen chandeliers, making the space feel both enormous and suffocating. It was the kind of place they loved, the kind of place I never belonged. 68 people, all dressed to the nines, all here for my older brother's big night. He was the decorated hero, the golden child. And me? I was just Arabella, the daughter they rarely mentioned, the sister they pretended didn't exist until it was convenient to make me the punchline. I told myself I came because it was the right thing to do, because you show up for family even when they don't show up for you. That's the lie I repeated to myself as I hovered by the back wall, a ghost at their feast. I watched my mother flit from guest to guest like a monarch butterfly, her pearls catching the light as easily as her fake smile did. From across the room, I could see my father by the bar, already holding court with a few of my brother's military buddies, his posture broad and confident. And there he was, my brother, Caleb, basking in the center of it all. He was letting everyone fawn over him like he was a king, accepting their praise with a practiced humility that made my stomach turn. He'd been cutting me down with that same smile since I was old enough to speak. "Arabella," a woman I barely knew said as she walked past, her tone polite but strained. "It's nice that you came. Nice that I came." The words hung in the air like a bad smell, as if my presence was an act of charity, a task I'd been assigned. I forced a smile that felt like cracking plaster and nodded. "Wouldn't miss it," I lied. My mother spotted me then. I saw her smile thin for just a fraction of a second, a tiny crack in her perfect facade that only I could see. She walked over, her heels clicking on the polished floor like tiny, insistent hammers drawing closer. Each click was a warning. "You didn't need to come if you had nothing nice to say," she murmured, her voice just loud enough for a nearby couple to hear. They glanced at me, their faces a mixture of pity and morbid entertainment, the look I knew so well. I kept my own voice soft, a whisper against her coldness. I didn't realize existing counted as commentary. Her eyes narrowed into slits. Before I could retreat, find a dark corner to disappear into, my brother appeared, a drink in hand, his medals shining like his ego. "Oh, Arabella," he said, his voice too loud, too casual. It was the voice he used when he wanted to perform for an audience. "I almost forgot you do, whatever it is you do." He paused for effect. "Graphic design. That's cute." He took a sip of his drink, his eyes mocking me over the rim of the glass. "I guess not everyone can serve their country." His words were designed to be little daggers, to remind me of my place. Small, unimportant, a cute little project. But something inside me, something I'd kept buried under years of silence and swallowed insults, finally snapped. My hands were trembling inside my purse, but my voice came out just as light and airy as his. "At least what I do doesn't come with a built-in fan club." The smirk on his face faltered, just for a second. It was a tiny victory, but it was mine. I wanted to savor it, to hold on to that flicker of confusion in his eyes, but I didn't get the chance. A shadow loomed over us. It was my father. His jaw was tight, his eyes already bloodshot and hard. He hadn't just been drinking, he'd been simmering. The air around him felt charged, dangerous. He didn't look at Caleb. He looked only at me. His voice was low, a rumble that vibrated through the floor, the kind that makes your stomach drop to your feet, the kind I knew from childhood, from behind closed doors. "What did you just say?" The question hung in the air, thick and heavy, sucking all the sound out of the room. "What did you just say?" My father's voice was a low growl, a promise of violence I had learned to recognize before I could even read. I opened my mouth to answer, to try and build a bridge back to safety with soft words, but I didn't get the chance. He moved faster than I thought a man his age could, closing the space between us in a single blurring step. The world seemed to slow down. I saw the calculated rage in his eyes, the slight pull at the corner of his mouth, the almost imperceptible tensing of his shoulder just before his arm swung. The crack of his open palm connecting with my face was louder than the string quartet. The music stopped, conversation stopped, my world stopped. Pain exploded through my jaw, a white-hot flash that sent stars dancing behind my eyes. For a moment I couldn't even process what had happened. There was just a high-pitched ringing in my ears and the coppery taste of blood filling my mouth. Then his hand was in my hair, fingers twisting into a fist, yanking me backward with a force that made my scalp scream. I gasped, a choked, wet sound, as he began to drag me toward the exit, like I was a bag of trash to be taken out. My heels scraped against the polished marble, the sound lost in the collective, horrified inhale of the crowd. I caught glimpses of faces as he pulled me through them. Shock, discomfort, a flicker of morbid curiosity. 68 people watching. Not one of them moved, not one of them spoke. It was a memory from when I was 14, flashing in my mind. The rough texture of the hallway wallpaper against my cheek after he'd shoved me into it for talking back. The same stunned silence from my mother then as she watched from the kitchen doorway. The silence of complicity. And then, through the ringing in my ears, I heard it. A sound that cut deeper than his fist, that burned hotter than the pain in my scalp. It was my mother's laugh. It wasn't a nervous titter. It was a sharp, delighted sound, pure and clear, as if this was the best entertainment she'd had in years. And as if to punctuate her approval, another sound followed, clapping, slow, deliberate. I twisted my head, the movement sending another bolt of agony through my neck, and I saw him. My brother Caleb, the golden child, was clapping. He met my gaze, a triumphant smirk on his face, and mouthed the words, "You had it coming." I think that's what broke me. Not the hit, not the humiliation, but that, the symphony of their betrayal. The hallway outside the ballroom was colder, quieter, but it didn't feel safer. He let go of me just outside the heavy oak doors, shoving me forward. I stumbled, catching myself against the wall, my cheek scraping against the cool plaster. My lip was split, and I felt a warm drop of blood fall onto the bodice of my dress. My scalp ached with a deep, throbbing pulse where his fingers had been. I didn't look back. I couldn't. If I saw their faces again, I knew a part of me would shatter for good. I just walked. No, I ran. I ran through the maze of opulent corridors, past oil paintings and gilded mirrors, until I burst through the main doors into the damp night air of the parking lot. Each step felt heavier than the last, my borrowed dignity left in pieces on the marble floor behind me. By the time I reached my beat-up sedan, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the keys out of my purse. I fumbled with the lock, finally wrenching the door open and collapsing into the driver's seat. I slammed the door shut, the sound a hollow thud in the near-empty lot. The silence was a relief, but it couldn't keep out the sounds now trapped in my head. My mother's laugh, my brother's words, and the deafening silence of all those people who just watched. In the rearview mirror, a stranger stared back at me. Her lip was swollen and already turning a dark shade of purple. Her hair was a tangled, wild mess. Her eyes were wide and red, but they were dry. I didn't remember crying. It was as if my body refused to give them the satisfaction of tears. I wiped the blood from my chin with the back of my hand, leaving a smeared red streak on my skin. I stared at that haunted reflection, at the girl who had spent her life making herself smaller, quieter, trying to earn a crumb of affection from people who only knew how to take, and I whispered to her, to myself, "This isn't just another night." A cold clarity washed over me, chilling me more than the night air. The shaking in my hands stopped. The throbbing in my jaw became a distant drumbeat. This wasn't pain anymore. This was fuel. This was a declaration. This was war. I reached for my phone on the passenger seat, my fingers curling around the cool glass and metal. I stared at the dark screen for a long moment, my own bruised face reflected faintly on its surface. Then I gripped it tight, took a deep, steadying breath, and my voice was a low, steady whisper in the stillness of the car. "It's time." The drive home was a blur. I drove on autopilot, my hands clenched so tightly on the steering wheel that my knuckles had turned a bloodless white. The steady hum of the tires on the wet highway was the only sound in my small car, a low drone that did nothing to silence the chaos inside my head. Every few seconds an image would flash behind my eyes, sharp and unwelcome. My father's hand coming toward me, my mother's head thrown back in a joyous laugh, Caleb's smug, clapping hands. The sounds and the silence swirled together like a storm I couldn't escape. By the time I parked on the quiet, tree-lined street outside my apartment building, the adrenaline had worn off enough for the physical pain to set in, sharp and insistent. My jaw throbbed in a sickening rhythm with my own heartbeat. I climbed the 3 narrow flights of stairs to my unit, each step heavier than the last, my hand trailing against the cool, peeling paint of the hallway wall to steady myself. When I finally pushed open my door, the silence of the small space nearly broke me. It was a deep, lonely quiet that felt heavier than the noise of the party. I wanted to scream, to shatter something, to match the violence that was ringing in my ears. Instead, I locked the door behind me, leaning my forehead against the cool wood, and just breathed. Slow, shaky, deliberate breaths. 1, 2, 3. The bathroom light was unkind. Fluorescent and humming, it stripped away all the shadows and left only the raw, ugly truth. I stood there in front of the mirror, my hands gripping the edges of the porcelain sink, and took in the stranger staring back at me. My lip was swollen to twice its normal size, a dark purple bruise already blooming across the left side of my face. My hair, which I had spent an hour styling, was a tangled mess where his fingers had yanked it. My dress, the one I'd saved up for because for once I wanted to look like I belonged, was torn at the shoulder, the delicate fabric ripped clean through. I expected to cry. I waited for the sting in my eyes, the familiar lump in my throat. But nothing came. It was like my body had decided I'd already given them enough. My grief, my pain, my tears, they had feasted on them for years. Tonight, the well was dry. With hands that wouldn't stop shaking, I reached for my phone. But I didn't dial 911. I didn't call a friend to cry to. I opened the camera. The word echoed in my mind, a steady beat against the chaos, evidence. I took the first picture. The shutter sound was unnaturally loud in the silent room. My swollen face angled to catch the light on the bruise. Click, my torn dress. Click, the red marks on my arms where I'd stumbled against the wall. Click, evidence. This wasn't just a bad night. This wasn't just another bruise I'd have to cover up with makeup and pretend didn't exist. This was a crime scene, and I was the only witness who mattered. I couldn't let them bury me in their silence again. Not this time. Sitting on the edge of my bed, the phone feeling heavy in my hand, I stared at my contacts list. I scrolled past names of college friends I hadn't spoken to in years, past old colleagues, past the numbers of people who existed in that other world, my family's world. They would never understand. They would tell me to be the bigger person, to let it go, to keep the peace. There was no peace to keep. Then I saw her name, Dana. Suddenly, I wasn't in my cold, silent apartment anymore. I was back in law school, in the stuffy, overcrowded library. I saw Dana as she was then, brilliant but broke, her face pale with exhaustion, staring at a textbook she couldn't afford. I remembered slipping her my old books, buying her coffee and telling her it was a 2-for-1 deal, even covering part of her rent one month when she was on the verge of dropping out. Her pride was a wall, but her gratitude was an ocean. "You saved me, Arabella," she'd whispered to me one night, her voice thick with unshed tears. I'll never forget it." Now, years later, she was one of the top attorneys in Austin. Her picture was in magazines. She didn't need my help anymore, but I needed hers. My thumb hovered over her name. What if she didn't remember? What if she was too busy, too important? What if she told me to call the police like everyone else? The doubt was a cold poison, a voice that sounded suspiciously like my mother's. I squeezed my eyes shut, took one last shaky breath, and pressed the screen. The phone rang. Once, twice, 3 times. I was about to hang up, my heart sinking with each unanswered ring. Then the line clicked. "Arabella?" Her voice was groggy, thick with sleep, but it was her. My own voice cracked on her name, a raw, broken sound. "Dana." I swallowed hard, forcing the words out past the lump in my throat. "I need help." I paused, the shame and fear washing over me. I don't know who else to call." There was a moment of silence on the other end, just the sound of her breathing. Then her voice was clear, awake, and steady as steel. "Talk to me." Those 2 words, "talk to me," were all it took. They were a key turning a lock I didn't even know was rusted shut. The story didn't just come out, it poured out of me, a raw, ugly torrent of words I'd held back my entire life. I sat on the cold floor of my apartment, leaning against the edge of my bed, and I told her everything. I started from the moment I walked into that ballroom, the fake smile plastered on my face, and I didn't stop until I was sitting alone in my car, humiliation a poison in my veins and blood on the dress I couldn't afford. I didn't soften it. I didn't make excuses for them. For the first time, I didn't say, "My father has a temper," or "My mother is complicated." I used the real words, hit, dragged, laughed, clapped. I gave her the raw, ugly truth, my voice growing hoarse and my throat feeling like sandpaper by the end. Through it all, Dana was silent on the other end. She didn't interrupt with gasps of horror or questions. She just listened, a steady grounding presence in the darkness. Her silence wasn't empty. It was absorbent. It was taking in every painful detail and holding it, validating it. When I finally stopped, when there were no more words left inside me, the quiet stretched for a long moment. Then she spoke, and her voice was no longer groggy. It was the calm, steady voice of the attorney she had become. "You need to come by my office tomorrow morning," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "We'll fix this, I promise." A promise from anyone else would have felt hollow, but from Dana it felt like a contract signed in blood. I believed her. After we hung up, I sat there for a long moment, the silence of my apartment feeling different now. It wasn't lonely anymore. It was charged with purpose. But I wasn't done. This fight would need more than just a brilliant lawyer. It would need a different kind of armor. I opened my contacts list again, my thumb scrolling past her name until I found another. Russell, my landlord. But he was more than that. He was a retired cop who'd turned to private investigation work, a quiet, watchful man who saw more from his ground-floor apartment than anyone gave him credit for. He'd always been kind to me in a distant, respectful way. A nod in the hallway, a moment of help with a heavy grocery bag, an unnerving ability to know when my car battery was about to die before I did. If there was anyone who could help me stay safe, who knew how to gather the things that live in the shadows, it was him. My finger trembled slightly as I pressed the call button. It went to voicemail. I took a breath, my voice low and urgent. "Russell, it's Arabella from 3B. I need help. Urgent. Please call me when you get this." I hung up, my heart pounding a nervous rhythm against my ribs. I waited, staring at the blank screen of my phone. 1 minute, 2. Maybe he was asleep. Maybe he'd think I was being dramatic. Maybe... My phone buzzed, lighting up the dark room. A text message from his number. I opened it. My breath caught in my chest. There were only 3 words. "You're safe. I'll dig." I read the message again and again. "You're safe. I'll dig." It wasn't much, but it felt like a suit of armor being lowered onto my shoulders. Dana would fight for me in the light, in the courthouses and law offices. Russell would fight for me in the dark. A new kind of calm settled over me. I moved slowly through my apartment, each action deliberate. I went to the kitchen, wrapped ice from the freezer in a dish towel, and pressed the cold pack to my throbbing jaw. The cold steadied me. I pulled on an old soft hoodie, the fabric a familiar comfort against my skin. I was no longer the girl in the torn party dress. Then I sat back on my bed, opened my laptop, and attached the photos I'd taken to a new email. My face, my dress, the evidence. I typed Dana's email address into the recipient line, my fingers hesitating for just a second over the keyboard. This was the final step. The point of no return. I hit send. The message whooshed away into the digital ether. As the sound faded, I realized my heart wasn't racing anymore. My hands weren't trembling. The numbness was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp focus. I was no longer the victim shivering in her car. I was a general, and I had just moved my first 2 pieces onto the board. I picked up my phone, holding it tightly, and looked at my own reflection in the dark screen. My face was still swollen, but my eyes were clear. I whispered the words into the stillness of the room, a promise to myself and a warning to them. They don't know what's coming. Morning came, but sleep hadn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his hand coming toward me, felt the phantom burn of his fingers yanking my hair. The darkness offered no rest, only a looping reel of the night's horrors. I showered, letting the hot water run over my skin for a long time, but it didn't wash off the shame. It felt like it had seeped into my bones. I dressed carefully, deliberately. Not for them, not anymore. For me. I chose old jeans and a loose dark sweater, the kind of clothes that felt like a protective shell, something to make me feel small and unnoticeable. I slid on a pair of oversized sunglasses, a dark shield to hide the bruising and swelling from the world. My jaw ached with a dull, persistent throb every time I moved my mouth, a constant physical reminder of the promise I'd made to myself in the dark. The streets downtown were quiet for a Saturday morning, wrapped in a cool, gray stillness. As I walked the 10 blocks to Dana's office, my heart pounded a hard, uneven rhythm against my ribs. It felt like anger and fear were 2 enemies fighting for control of my body, driving me forward. I had told Dana I was ready. But was I? Was anyone ever truly ready to declare war on their own blood? When I reached the towering glass building, my own reflection stopped me for a second. The woman staring back from the polished surface wasn't the girl who had cried in her car the night before. This woman was bruised, yes, her face a pale canvas of pain, but her chin was slightly raised. Her eyes, hidden behind the dark lenses, felt steady. She looked like she was daring the world to challenge her again. The receptionist inside barely glanced up from her computer before pointing me toward a corner office with a sweeping view of the city. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open gently. Dana stood as I walked in, crossing the room in 3 quick, purposeful strides. Arabella. Her voice was low but steady, like an anchor in a storm. She hugged me carefully, her arms wrapping around me with a strength that was mindful of my injuries. When she pulled back, her sharp, intelligent eyes scanned my face, taking in the damage without a trace of pity. There was only a cold, simmering anger there on my behalf. "Are you ready to burn it all down?" she asked, her voice a quiet challenge. A month ago, a week ago, even yesterday morning, the question would have terrified me. Now, I met her gaze without flinching. "I already did," I said softly, my voice clear. "In my head, last night." She gestured for me to sit, and I sank into the plush leather chair across from her expansive desk. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence in this office was different from the silence in my apartment. This was the quiet of power, of strategy. Then she leaned forward, her hands folded on the desk, her focus entirely on me. "Tell me everything," she said. And I did. But I didn't just tell her about last night. The words came, and with them, the ghosts of 1,000 other nights. I told her about being 14 and being shoved hard into a wall for talking back, and my mother watching from the doorway, a flicker of amusement in her eyes. I told her about every holiday where I was the invisible one, every birthday overshadowed by one of Caleb's manufactured achievements. I told her how my father always said I was wasting my potential when I chose to pursue art instead of following him into law, how he called my passion a worthless hobby. I described the way my mother would humiliate me in front of her friends, dismissing my graphic design work as cute little projects, her voice dripping with condescending sweetness that was meant to sting. Dana didn't write anything down. She just listened, her expression unreadable, her focus absolute. She let me empty all the poison I had been carrying for years onto the polished surface of her desk. "This isn't the first time he's hit me," I finally admitted, the words hanging in the still air like smoke. It was the deepest, most shameful secret of all, and saying it aloud felt like a betrayal of the girl I used to be, the one who always protected their perfect family image. "But this time," I continued, my voice gaining strength, "this time was different. This time there were 68 people watching, and they did nothing." I watched her face closely, waiting for the flicker of shock or sympathy. I saw neither. Instead, her jaw tightened, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift. She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto mine, and the calm, listening attorney was gone. In her place was a predator who had just caught the scent of blood in the water. "Arabella," she said, her voice dropping, now charged with a new, dangerous energy. "That changes everything." The words hung in the air between us, heavy and absolute. That changes everything. My mind raced, trying to grasp the meaning behind her sudden shift in tone. I had confessed my deepest shame, the public nature of my humiliation, and instead of pity, I saw a flicker of something else in her eyes. It was the look of a predator that had just been handed a weapon. She leaned forward, her voice calm but charged with a purpose that sent a shiver down my spine. "We start with documentation," she began, her words crisp and precise, each one a stone being laid for the foundation of a war. "Police reports, medical exams. We make every bruise, every scratch, every ripped strand of hair official. We create a paper trail so clean and so undeniable that they can't spin their way out of it." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. This was what I expected. A lawsuit, a formal process. "Then," she continued, her gaze unwavering, "we send a civil notice. We let them know officially that you are coming for them. They will try to bury this. They'll offer you money, a gag order disguised as a peace offering. They will try to buy your silence." My mind flashed to the countless times my silence had been expected, demanded. It was the currency of our family. "And when they do," Dana said, a dangerous edge to her voice, "we leak every single shred of evidence we have. Because someone in that ballroom filmed it, Arabella. You know they did. In a room of 68 people with phones in their pockets, someone recorded it. And we are going to find that video." The air left my lungs in a quiet whoosh. The thought hadn't even occurred to me. The shame had been so blinding, I'd only registered the faces, not the phones they were holding. "Leak it?" I finally managed to whisper. "Leak it to who?" A small, cold smile touched Dana's lips. "To anyone who matters to them," she replied without hesitation. "The Army, so they can reevaluate their decorated hero. Your father's business partners, their colleagues at the firm, their country club friends, all the people they perform for, the ones who would be horrified to know the truth behind their spotless image. We won't just sue them, Arabella. We will dismantle their world from the inside out." The words settled over me, not with fear, but like a suit of armor I hadn't known I needed. She wasn't just talking about justice. She was talking about retribution. She understood that their money was just a tool. Their reputation was their lifeblood. She opened a drawer in her sleek, modern desk, pulled out a simple white business card, and slid it across the polished surface toward me. The name on it was followed by the words, "Trauma and Recovery Specialist." "This," Dana said softly, her tone shifting from warrior back to friend, "is for you. You need to start healing while I start destroying. They've had your voice for too long." I stared at the card, running my thumb along its sharp, clean edge. Healing? The word felt foreign, like a language I hadn't spoken in years. My entire life had been about enduring, about surviving. "Arabella," she said, her voice gentle but firm, pulling my gaze back to hers. "You have been surviving in silence for too long. It's time to live loud." Surviving in silence. The phrase echoed through the long, empty hallways of my memory. Every swallowed retort, every forced smile, every time I had quietly mended my own wounds so no one would see. She was right. That wasn't living. I looked down at the therapist's card one last time, a map to a place I wasn't sure I could find. Then I looked up at Dana, at the fierce loyalty in her eyes. I pushed the card back into my purse, stood up, and my voice was steady when I answered her. It was the calmest I had felt all day. Do it! Walking out of that office, the afternoon sun hit me like a physical blow. It felt brighter, sharper. The city was louder now. Cars honked. People rushed by on the sidewalks, their chatter filling the air. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was just a ghost passing through my own life, invisible to the world. I felt my feet on the concrete. I felt the air fill my lungs. They wanted me small. They wanted me silent. They had spent a lifetime building a cage of shame and fear around me, expecting me to stay inside it forever. As I stood on that busy street corner, surrounded by the noise and chaos of life, I finally understood. If they wanted me silent, they should have left me unbroken. 2 days had passed since I walked out of Dana's office. 2 days of silence from my family, a silence that was heavier and more menacing than any angry phone call could have been. The raw, hot anger I'd felt had cooled, settling into something colder, sharper. It was a whetstone in my gut, honing my resolve with every slow, passing hour. My face still ached, a dull reminder every time I chewed or tried to smile, not that I had much reason to. But the bruises weren't the worst part. The worst part was knowing that every single person from that ballroom went home that night, carried on with their lives, while I sat in my apartment trying to remember how to breathe. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter that morning, a sharp, intrusive sound in the quiet. It was Russell. The message was 5 words long. "Come by, got something for you." I took a long sip of my now cold coffee, grabbed my keys, and headed down the 2 flights of stairs to his unit. Russell's apartment was the polar opposite of my parents' house. It was sparse, functional, everything in its place. It smelled of old books and black coffee. He opened the door almost immediately, as if he'd been waiting right behind it. "Arabella," he said, his voice a low rumble. He stepped aside to let me in, handing me a steaming mug of coffee without asking if I wanted one. He just knew. I sat at his small kitchen table, the kind of place where you could tell 100 stories had been told over cheap coffee and stronger liquor. He didn't bother with small talk. He just reached under a stack of papers on his counter and slid a thick beige folder across the table toward me. It landed with a soft, heavy thud. "You need to see this," he said. My stomach tightened. "What is it?" "Your family," he said, his voice low and serious. "And not just what happened the other night. This goes deeper, Arabella, a lot deeper." With trembling fingers, I pulled the folder closer and opened it. The first few pages were bank statements. My eyes darted over the columns of numbers, trying to make sense of them. Then I saw it. An account number I recognized. The trust fund my grandmother had left me, the one I wasn't supposed to touch until I was 30. And flowing out of it, a series of large transfers. $50,000 here, $75,000 there. The recipient names were shell corporations I'd never heard of. My breath caught in my throat. "Russell," my voice cracked, though I fought to keep it steady. "This is my money." He nodded slowly, his gaze unwavering. "Your father has been moving funds out for months, using a power of attorney you probably don't even remember signing when you were 18. I felt a dizzying wave of nausea. The money was one thing, but why? For what? "Look at this," he said, pointing to a new page he'd laid on top. It was a printout of an email thread, the text stark and black against the white paper. My eyes snagged on a single line in the body of the message. "Make sure Caleb shines. His father has been very persuasive." The room blurred for a second. The words swam before my eyes. Persuasive. That's what they called it. My own money, the nest egg my grandmother had carefully built for my future, had been stolen to celebrate my brother. The same brother who clapped while I was being dragged out of that ballroom, bleeding from a wound inflicted by the very man who signed the checks. "So it wasn't earned," I said finally, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. The promotion, none of it was real. Russell leaned back in his chair, his expression grim. "Not even close," he said. "This wasn't just abuse, Arabella. This is theft and fraud." My father's voice echoed in my mind, a memory from a dozen different holidays and family dinners. "You should be grateful for what we give you, Arabella." Grateful. He'd been taking from me my whole life, not just my dignity, but my future. He'd used my own resources to build a pedestal for my brother and then laughed when I fell off it. Without thinking, I pulled out my phone. I snapped a single clear photo of the most damning page, the one with the email and the largest bank transfer side by side. The proof, the motive, the betrayal, all on one screen. I sent it to Dana with a single, cold message. Change of plans. I want it all on record. I watched the 3 little dots appear and disappear. A moment later, her reply came. It was as sharp and brutal as her new strategy. "Then we play dirty." I stared down at the phone at Dana's 5 sharp words. "Then we play dirty." The message felt like a live wire in my hand. I looked up at Russell, who was watching me with those observant ex-cop eyes that missed nothing. He crossed his arms over his broad chest. "So," he said, his voice a low rumble, "what's your next move?" I traced the edge of the folder with my finger, the paper filled with the proof of their lies. A cold resolve settled deep in my bones, pushing out the last vestiges of fear. "My next move," I said slowly, meeting his gaze, "is making sure they regret every single choice that brought us here." Later that day, I took the folder to a coffee shop near downtown. It felt strange to be somewhere so aggressively normal, surrounded by the buzz of people chatting about weekend plans and complaining about work, while I held the evidence that could detonate my family's carefully polished world. I spread the pages out on the small table, the aroma of roasted coffee beans mingling with the scent of betrayal. I scanned them over and over, committing every stolen dollar, every deceitful email to memory. My brother clapped while I bled, with money that was mine. The rage was a physical thing, a tightness in my chest that threatened to choke me. They had turned me into an outsider in my own life, then used my own resources to build his. "They think I'll stay quiet," I whispered to the bottom of my empty coffee cup. "They really don't know me at all." When I parked outside my parents' house, the neighborhood felt as artificial as the people waiting for me inside. Perfectly trimmed hedges, identical mailboxes, sprawling houses that looked like they'd been printed out of a catalog of quiet desperation. My hands stayed on the steering wheel for a long minute, my knuckles white. Dana's voice echoed in my head from a call earlier that morning. "If it feels wrong, you leave. Don't give them anything." I finally unclenched my fingers and got out. The autumn air felt heavy, almost damp, as I walked up the stone path I'd walked 1,000 times before. Growing up, I used to imagine running away from this house. Now I was walking in by choice, fully aware they had no idea who they were dealing with anymore. My mother opened the door before I even knocked, dressed in one of her pastel cardigans that always made her look so delicate, so harmless. "Arabella," she said, her voice the soft, feathery tone she used when she was playing the victim. "Thank you for coming." "Let's just get to it," I said flatly, stepping past her into the foyer. She flinched at my cold tone but said nothing. The house smelled of lemon polish and whatever fancy candles she was burning to mask the stench of tension. My father was already seated in the formal living room, the kind of sterile space we only ever used for holidays and performative moments like this. Caleb was there too, lounging on an armchair like he owned the place, a smirk already plastered on his face as he scrolled through his phone. "Arabella," my father said without looking up from a magazine, as if I were a subordinate he'd called into his office. "Sit." I remained standing. On the glass coffee table in front of them sat a neat stack of papers, held together by a binder clip. I didn't have to read them to know what they were. A settlement? Hush money. "We asked you here," my mother began, settling gracefully on the sofa, "because we want to resolve this unpleasantness as a family." Caleb chuckled without looking up from his phone. "You mean because she's making a big deal out of nothing?" My eyes snapped to him, my voice like ice. "Still riding high off your fake promotion, Caleb? Must be nice to win awards with someone else's money." His smirk faltered for a fraction of a second, and his thumb stopped moving. My father's hand clenched on the armrest of his chair. "Enough," he barked. He slid the papers across the table toward me. "This is an agreement. You'll sign it, take a generous payout, and in return, this whole situation disappears. No more drama, no more embarrassing the family. I glanced at the top page. Non-disclosure agreement, waiver of legal claims, a gag order dressed up as a peace offering. Generous payout, I repeated, my voice dripping with scorn. Funny how you think my silence has a price. It was a small bruise, Arabella, Caleb said, finally looking at me with pure condescension. Why blow up the entire family over that? I stared at him, my gaze so hard I hoped it would burn him. You watched him drag me out by my hair while you clapped? You think I still care about this family? My mother leaned forward, her voice all syrup and poison. This will protect everyone's reputation, dear, including yours. That's when I saw it. Tucked beside the base of a heavy brass lamp on the end table, almost hidden in the shadow. It was small, black, and plastic. A tiny red light, no bigger than a pinprick, was glowing steadily. A voice recorder. They weren't trying to make peace. This was an ambush. They were trying to record me, waiting for me to lose my temper, waiting for me to yell or scream so they could twist my words and paint me as the unstable one. The realization washed over me, not with heat, but with an Arctic cold. I put the papers back down on the table, my movements slow and deliberate. You know what's funny? I said, my voice dropping to a low, conversational tone that was more dangerous than any shout. I let my eyes drift from my father's face, to my mother's, to my brother's, before letting them land on the lamp. You think I walked in here today as the same person you used to push around? You think I didn't notice the little recorder over there? The silence that followed my question was more damning than any confession. For a split second, the mask of calm, parental concern on my mother's face shattered, replaced by the pinched, ugly look of someone caught in a lie. Caleb's nervous smirk vanished, and he actually sat up straight, his eyes wide with disbelief. My father's jaw, already tight, hardened into a block of granite. The carefully constructed stage play had just been torn down, and they were all exposed under the harsh lights. I didn't wait for them to recover. I let my cold gaze drift back to my father. You think you can throw me a few pennies from my own stolen trust fund and make me disappear? I said, my voice still low, but each word was a carefully aimed dart. You think that's the price for what you did? That's what broke him. Not my defiance, but the mention of the money, the fraud, the one crime that had tangible proof. He slammed his hand down on the glass coffee table so hard the porcelain cups rattled in their saucers. Don't you dare play the victim in my house, he roared, his face turning a blotchy, furious red. The civilized lawyer was gone, replaced by the brute I knew so well. He wanted me to scream. He wanted me to cry. He wanted the hysterical daughter he could dismiss and control. I gave him none of it. Instead, I took a deliberate step forward, leaning over the table until our faces were only a few feet apart. I looked directly into his bloodshot eyes, and the storm of rage inside me went perfectly, terrifyingly still. I'm not playing anything, I said, my voice a blade of ice. I came here tonight to give you one last chance to be human, but this, I gestured to the papers, to the recorder, to their shocked faces. This isn't a negotiation. This is your warning. You have no idea what you've started. My mother let out a strangled gasp, her hand flying to her pearls as if I'd just cursed in church. Caleb, trying desperately to regain some ground, let out a shaky, nervous laugh. You're bluffing, he stammered. You've got nothing. I straightened up, a slow, deliberate movement. I looked at the three of them, my father, still seething, my mother, pale with shock, my brother, a hollow imitation of his usual arrogance. They were so used to winning, so used to me breaking, that they couldn't comprehend a reality where I didn't. Keep thinking that, I said softly. I turned my back on them, picked up my bag from the floor, and walked toward the front door. I didn't run. I walked with a steadiness I hadn't felt in years, each step an act of liberation. I didn't look back. I could feel their eyes on me, their confusion and fury a palpable force at my back, but it couldn't touch me anymore. Outside, the cool night air hit my face like a splash of cold water, washing away the suffocating atmosphere of that house. My hands shook as I opened my car door, but it wasn't from fear. It was the pure, unadulterated hum of adrenaline. It was clarity. I sat in the driver's seat, the silence of the car a welcome sanctuary. I looked back at the house, at the warm, golden light spilling from the living room window, a perfect picture of a perfect family. A complete lie. They thought this was about bruises and signatures. They thought they could bully and buy their way out of a lifetime of cruelty. They were still playing by the old rules, using the old tactics that had always worked on the old me, but the old me was gone. She had bled out on a ballroom floor 2 nights ago. They had no idea what was coming. I pulled out my phone, the screen lighting up my face in the darkness. My thumb hovered over my contacts. They wanted me silent, I whispered to myself, a bitter smile touching my lips for the first time. They had built their entire world on my silence. It was time to get loud. It was time to bring in a professional. Instead of calling Dana or Russell, I scrolled to a new number. I wasn't going to fight them in a courtroom or in the shadows anymore. I was going to fight them in the one place that terrified them most, the light. I took a deep breath and made the call. It was time to call someone who makes noise for a living. I sat in my car for a long time, the engine off, the phone feeling like a 50-pound weight in my hand. Then I dialed. Jenna Martinez. Her voice was exactly as I remembered from college. Sharp, a little rushed, and perpetually curious. Jenna, it's Arabella Vale, I said, my own voice low and intense. I have a story for you, the kind you build a career on, but you have to meet me now. By early afternoon the next day, we were sitting at an upscale cafe downtown, the kind of place where people linger over $7 lattes, pretending their lives aren't falling apart. I wasn't there to blend in. I was there to drop a bomb. I'd chosen the location carefully. It was public, bright, and the last place my family would ever think to look for me. I saw Jenna before she saw me. She rushed in, 10 minutes late, looking frazzled but alive with the frenetic energy of a journalist chasing a deadline. Her eyes scanned the room until they landed on me. I remembered her from our internship days, a brilliant writer with more ambition than money, who I'd once helped get out of a sticky situation involving a plagiarized quote and an angry editor. She'd sworn she owed me one. Today, I was collecting. Arabella, she said, sliding into the seat across from me, her gaze taking in the faint bruising still visible on my jaw. You sounded intense on the phone. I didn't waste time on pleasantries. I pushed a small, plain flash drive across the table, along with a few printed documents from Russell's folder. This will explain why, I said. She picked up the flash drive, her expression shifting from curious to serious. What's on this? A video, I said, my voice flat. Of my father hitting me at my brother's party, the fraud, the whole thing. She raised an eyebrow, her journalistic instincts kicking in. And you're okay with me running this? I want you to, I said plainly, but I stay anonymous for now. The story is about a prominent local businessman, understood? She nodded slowly, her eyes scanning the top page of the documents. I watched her expression change. Her eyes widened, her mouth parted slightly. The professional curiosity was replaced by genuine shock. Arabella, this isn't just family drama. This is felony assault and financial fraud. You know this will blow up, right? This will be huge. That's the point, I said. Back at Dana's office, the air was thick with anticipation. The clock on the wall seemed to tick unnaturally loudly. Dana had already drafted and sent a crisp, calculated official statement to Jenna, framing the assault as part of a larger pattern of coercion and financial exploitation. It was a masterpiece of legal aggression. Now, we just had to wait. The article dropped 3 hours later. The headline was brutal and precise, exactly what I'd hoped for. Prominent local businessman caught on camera assaulting daughter at family event. Financial exploitation alleged. Within minutes, my phone, which I'd left face up on Dana's desk, began to light up. It was a wildfire. Messages from distant relatives, old family friends, even people I hadn't spoken to in a decade. Some were supportive, filled with shocked apologies for not seeing what was happening. Others were stunned into silence, asking if it was true. Then Dana's phone rang. She answered, listened for a moment, and a small, amused smile played on her lips. They're panicking, she said after she hung up, her voice tinged with satisfaction. That was your father, screaming. He wants to meet. He demanded to talk to you. I didn't even hesitate. No. Dana's smile widened. You don't even want to hear what he has to offer? I thought of them in their pristine living room, with their hidden recorder and their pathetic offer of hush money. They wanted silence, I said, my voice as cold as ice. They can choke on it now. By the time I left her office, social media was ablaze. Someone had leaked the video from the flash drive. The clip of my father dragging me out of that ballroom by my hair was everywhere. The comments section was a torrent of outrage and disbelief. "Who does that to their own daughter?" one read. "Imagine being the brother, clapping while your sister bleeds," said another. "It was a digital firestorm, and my family was at the center of it, burning." As I sat in my car, staring at the endless scroll of notifications on my phone, a new message buzzed through, stark and different from the rest. An unknown number. My blood went cold as I read the words. It wasn't a question, it was a threat. "You think you've won? You don't know what's coming." I stared at the text message on my phone, my pulse steady, my fingers tightening around the cool glass. That wasn't from my dad. The venom was the same, but the tone was colder, more calculated. His rage was a wildfire. This was a shard of ice. The message was clear. They were regrouping, and I was no longer just the inconvenient daughter. I was the enemy. I barely slept. When I did drift off, my dreams were a jumbled, suffocating mess of Caleb smirking at his party, my father's fist hitting my face, and my mother's voice. But she wasn't laughing this time. She was whispering in my ear, the same words she'd whispered to me when I was 15, after I'd made the mistake of telling a guidance counselor my dad had shoved me. "You should have stayed quiet." I woke up to my phone buzzing relentlessly on the nightstand. I blinked at the screen, my heart pounding as I saw the dozens of notifications. A few were supportive. "Stay strong, Arabella. You're brave for speaking up." But then I saw the others, a flood of them, drowning out the support. "Liar, gold digger, daddy's girl gone crazy." My stomach dropped. They'd released something. I threw off my blanket, my hands shaking as I grabbed my laptop and logged onto every platform I could think of. And there it was, a professionally edited clip from the party, already with thousands of views. In this version, my father wasn't a monster. He was calm, composed, his hands held up in a placating gesture as he seemed to plead with me. And me? They had spliced together fragments of me yelling after the assault, my face contorted in pain and rage, making it look like I was the one who was unstable, like I was the one who had caused it all. The comments were a brutal testament to how well it was working. I felt the air leave my lungs. They weren't just fighting back. They were rewriting reality. As if on cue, my phone lit up with Dana's name. I answered, and her voice was clipped, all business. "I was about to call you," she said. "They filed a defamation suit and an injunction first thing this morning. They're trying to shut you up." I let out a bitter, humorless laugh. "Of course they are." "It's worse, Arabella," she added, and I froze. "They hired Marcus Layton." Marcus Layton. The name sucked the air out of the room. He was the guy powerful men and corporations brought in when they wanted to make scandals and victims disappear. He didn't just win cases, he buried people. "Arabella, this is serious. They're coming at us hard." "I'm not scared of him," I said, though my voice betrayed a slight tremble. Before I could say more, my phone buzzed with another call waiting. My mother. Against every rational instinct, I told Dana I'd call her back and answered it. "Arabella," she said, and just from her tone, I knew this wasn't a call to make peace. Her voice was a low hiss of fury. "You've gone too far," she seethed. "You have embarrassed this family beyond repair. Your father hasn't left his study in a day. Caleb can't even show his face at work." I gripped the edge of my kitchen counter, my knuckles turning white, forcing myself not to scream into the phone. "You watched him hit me," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "You laughed. And you're angry at me for telling the truth?" "Truth?" She exhaled sharply, the sound a puff of pure disdain. "You think this is about truth? You don't survive in this family by being righteous, Arabella. You survive by knowing when to shut up." Her words hit me with the force of a physical blow. All my life, that had been her mantra, her lesson, her religion. Shut up, stay small, survive. I felt my throat tighten, but I refused to let her hear me cry. I would not give her one more tear. "Then I guess I'm done surviving," I said, my voice shaking with a rage so cold it felt like grief. I hung up before she could say another word. For a long moment, I just stood there, staring at my own distorted reflection in the dark screen of the microwave door. My hair was a mess. My face still carried the faint yellow-purple shadow of a healing bruise, but my eyes, they didn't look like the girl who used to beg for scraps of their approval anymore. They looked like someone who had just been handed a declaration of war and had accepted the terms. Walking up the courthouse steps, I felt the weight of every whisper, every camera flash, every curious stare. The air was cold, biting. But they weren't looking at me like the black sheep anymore, the family ghost they pitied. They were looking at me like someone who was about to rewrite the story. Dana walked beside me, her calm a tangible force field, while Russell followed a step behind, carrying the thick binder of evidence that represented my stolen past and my reclaimed future. Inside, the courtroom was cold and tense, smelling of old wood and fear. My father was already there, sitting stiffly at the plaintiff's table in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my car. Caleb sat beside him, his face pale and waxy, all the bravado from the promotion party gone, leaving behind a hollow-eyed boy. And my mother. She sat perfectly still, her back ramrod straight, staring at the wall ahead. She didn't even look up when I walked in. She wouldn't meet my eyes. The attorney my father hired, Marcus Layton, stood to speak. His voice was a confident boom, filling the cavernous room. "Your Honor, my clients have been defamed. Their reputations, painstakingly built over decades, have been dragged through the mud by baseless accusations and a misleading, manipulated video." Misleading. I kept my face still, my hands folded calmly in my lap, but inside I felt my pulse pounding. He was calling my bruises, my torn hair, my terror, misleading. Then Dana stood, and her voice, though quiet, cut through the room like steel. "Your Honor," she said, "we not only reject their claims of defamation, we present evidence that my client, Miss Vale, was the victim of physical assault, financial exploitation, and a malicious campaign of witness intimidation, all orchestrated by the very people filing this lawsuit." She motioned to Russell, who carried the thick binder forward and placed it on the table with a heavy, final thud. The judge gestured for her to continue. Dana flipped open the binder and began. She laid it all out with chilling precision. Bank statements, wire transfers, emails Russell had dug up from forgotten servers. "This," she said, her voice ringing with clarity, "is a paper trail proving that Mr. Vale, using his authority over his daughter's trust, siphoned hundreds of thousands of dollars into shell corporations. Those corporations then funded his son Caleb's career advancement." She paused, letting the words sink in. "This was her money, Your Honor. Stolen, laundered, and used to bankroll the very event where she was publicly assaulted." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Reporters scribbled furiously in their notebooks. Caleb shifted in his seat, looking like he wanted to shrink into nothing. My father didn't flinch, but I saw a muscle jump in his clenched jaw. "Are you prepared to substantiate these claims, counsel?" the judge asked, his brow furrowed. "Yes, Your Honor," Dana said. "We have everything." Layton sputtered, "This is irrelevant to the defamation suit." "No," the judge interrupted, his voice sharp, silencing him instantly. "It is highly relevant. If these records are accurate, this court must consider whether the plaintiffs themselves have engaged in criminal conduct." He looked down at my father, then at me. "I am unsealing these records for immediate review." That was it. The moment the ground fell away beneath their feet. The sound I'd been waiting for, the sound of them losing control. During the recess, I stepped outside into the bright, cold sun and a sea of waiting cameras. Dana had prepared me for this. I walked to the microphones, my voice clear and steady. For years, my family defined me as the problem, the failure. Today, I reclaim my name. This was never just about a single night. It was about years of abuse and theft. I will not be silent, and I will not be intimidated. Behind me, Dana handed Jenna a new flash drive. This one held the full, unedited video of the party. Within an hour, it was everywhere. No clever edits, just the ugly, undeniable truth. The fallout was swift. By the end of the day, my father's company had lost 2 major contracts. By the end of the week, Caleb had issued a statement resigning from his position, citing personal reasons. His fake career, built on my stolen money, was over. Later, in Dana's quiet office, as the city lights began to flicker on outside, she asked me softly, "Do you feel satisfied?" I thought about it for a long moment. I thought of my mother, who never once looked at me in that courtroom. I thought of my father's empire crumbling. I thought of Caleb's empty victory. "It's not satisfaction," I said finally. "It's freedom." I reached into my purse and pulled out the small, beautifully wrapped box I had brought to the party that night. The gift from my brother, dropped and forgotten in the chaos. Inside was an engraved compass. I took it out, the metal cool against my skin, and closed my hand around it. It was mine now. I learned that freedom isn't about winning a war against the people who hurt you. It's about winning the right to own your story and speak your truth without apology. And I learned that some doors, once you find the courage to slam them shut, should stay that way forever. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please consider hitting the like button, subscribing to the channel for more content, and sharing this video. Tell us in the comments if you've ever had to fight to reclaim your own story. Your support means the world, and we'll see you in the next video.